Welcome back to the Gweilo Sexy channel. Have you been watching what's been going on in the South China Sea between the Philippines and China? The Americans are in there too. Blinken, the Secretary of State, and Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce, just did a trip into the Philippines, promising them the world. And what does Marcos Jr. do? Well, he does a 180 flip on China policy. Stopping the Belt and Road Initiative projects in the Philippines, aligning themselves with the Americans rather than with the Chinese. Their policy has just changed a lot, and the Americans are pushing the Philippines taking of islands and knolls in the South China Sea. And you got to wonder, who's on the right side of this one? Because, how can China own all of the islands in the South China Sea? We got to go back about 1,000 years and know that China was the one that populated the South China Sea. They had commerce throughout the South China Sea. They were doing the fishing and whatever. And there wasn't a lot of developed countries back in those days. So it was just sort of given that it was China's. So then you fast forward to, then you say 1,000 years ago, yeah, right, Gweilo. But you fast forward to 1935, and they had this thing called the Potsdam Declaration that was signed, and what that was is China proclaiming that all of these islands in the South China Sea were their territory. Okay. It wasn't disputed by any country around the world. It wasn't disputed by anybody. And you got to think, okay, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, these are the three countries that have disputes against China in the South China Sea over islands and knolls and whatever. Well, they hadn't even come into existence till 11 years, at least 11 years after this declaration was proclaimed. So in 1935, China owned all of the islands in the South China Sea, and they populated them, and it was their land. Okay. Then the Japanese come along and start taking people's stuff, and boots on the ground in China, killed 20 million people in China during the Second World War. Little kids, eh? The Second World War, and well, everybody knows the history of the Second World War. After the Japanese were beaten down after the Second World War, it created a vacuum in this area of the world, and the ROC, the Republic of China at that time, the nationalists were in charge in government here in China. And they were a government that was subservient to the Americans back then. And the Americans backed the ROC in their claim over all of these islands. So they came back from Japan and were put in the hands of the Chinese government, the Chinese people, the country of China. And they were flying the Chinese flag once again on all of these islands. All right, so then the ROC sort of lost the Civil War to the Communist Party of China, who was not subservient to the Americans and the American government. Now, the American policy starts to change. Fast forward to today, because the Communist Party of China has gotten really, really strong. And the country is, look behind me, you know what I mean? They're financially strong, they're militarily strong, their technology is second to none in the world. They're just, it's just a really great country. It's growing and getting stronger. So now the Americans see China as a threat. So what can they do to poke China? Well, they tried the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, proclaiming that there was genocide and there was arbitrarily detained and there was all of this stuff. Well, it didn't seem to work because it was just proven not to be true. Now in the Philippines, they're trying to get the Philippines into skirmish with China. Why would they want to do that? Well, probably the same reason as in the Ukraine, backing the Ukraine against Russia. Well, they don't want to get into a skirmish with Russia, so they get this proxy war going, and they supply money and guns and everything to the Ukrainians. So they're trying to create a Ukrainian syndrome, I guess, between the Philippines and the Chinese, and saying that they'll back them financially and militarily if that happens. Okay, so do the Philippines own these properties? No. Even in, I think it was 1984, you go back to Rand McNally map, printed in the United States, had all of these islands under China. That's the Rand McNally Atlas type thing, eh? So even up to 1984, the Americans were still backing the idea that China was the owner of all the islands in the South China Sea. China has become stronger. China is a competitor to the Americans in the American way of life, I guess. What they want to do is try to do whatever they can to destabilize China, to take property away from, to get China into skirmishes with their neighbors, to try to make the world look at China in a negative way. You see it on mainstream media. You see the $300 billion a year that the American government, taxpayers, not the government, are spending on blackening the eye of the Chinese people and the Chinese government and the country of China, making it look bad for some reason or other. And this is just another way of them doing it, provoking China, provoking the Philippines into disputes, territorial disputes in the South China Sea, and then backing them. Do you think that the Philippine army government would have the balls to go up against China if they didn't have the Americans behind them pushing them in that direction? No, there's no possible way. So when it comes to who owns these islands in the South China Sea, I think you have to go back and look at history. And back 1,000 years ago, they were Chinese property. Back in 1935, they were proclaimed Chinese islands. They were, after the World War II ended and Japan was sent back home, the ROC, the government of China at that time, was given back the islands because it was an ally of the United States at that time. And those islands have been in China's possession up until present day. And now countries that weren't even around when the proclamation in 1935 was proclaimed, now they lay claim to these islands in the South China Sea. Now, I think China's on the right side on this one, and the islands are Chinese, and they should assert their right and make sure that these islands stay under the Chinese flag. Simple and easy. Go back, read the history on this one, make up your own mind, but that's my take on it. What a beautiful city. Today is a nice day, 23 degrees in Nanning, and just loving it. That's another video from Gweilo 60. If you like this video, as always, like, comment, subscribe, push that share button. Don't forget to resubscribe, hit the bell, and until next time, thanks for watching. Peace out. Bye now.